I'm Samantha, 38, and nothing could have prepared me for what I discovered at my mountain lodge that evening. After a brutal year of divorce proceedings and workplace burnout, all I wanted was solitude. Instead, I found strange belongings scattered throughout my sanctuary. As I stood frozen in the living room, I heard the shower running upstairs. Grabbing the fireplace poker, I crept up the stairs only to come face to face with my sister Rebecca and her husband Tyler emerging from the bathroom, looking terrified. Behind them stood his parents, brother, and sister, all staring wide-eyed at me. Rebecca blurted, "Sam, you weren't supposed to be here until next week." Then Tyler's mother asked coldly, "Rebecca, who is this woman and why does she have a key?" Before I dive into the full story of what happened next, I'm curious to know where you're watching from today. The mountains hold such different meanings depending on where you live. Are they your escape or your everyday view? Drop a like if you've ever had a family member overstep their boundaries, and subscribe if you want more stories about standing up for yourself when it matters most. Trust me, what happened next in this lodge changed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. The mountain lodge had been my emotional anchor for as long as I could remember. My grandparents built it themselves in the 1,960 seconds, a charming 3-bedroom A-frame nestled among towering pines with a view of the lake below. After my parents died in a car accident when I was 10 and Rebecca was 6, our grandparents raised us there. Every corner held memories. The kitchen where Grandma taught me to bake her famous apple pie, the stone fireplace where Grandpa told ghost stories on winter nights, the back porch where I'd sit for hours reading while Rebecca played in the yard. When my grandparents passed away 5 years ago, they left the lodge to me. Their will was specific. I had been the one who helped maintain the property as they aged, coming up every other weekend to fix leaky faucets, repaint weathered shutters, and keep the place in good condition. Rebecca had moved to the city for college and rarely visited. She hadn't hidden her disappointment about the inheritance, though she had her own condo in the city that our parents' life insurance had paid for. "It's not fair," she had said at the reading of the will. "Just because you played handyman doesn't mean you deserve everything." I tried to be generous, telling her she could use the lodge whenever she wanted. "Just give me a heads up first," I'd said, but over the years, a pattern emerged. Rebecca would borrow my things without asking, clothes from my closet in our teens, my car in college, and now, apparently, my mountain sanctuary. After a decade-long marriage to Michael ended in divorce 8 months ago, he left me for his 24-year-old assistant, the oldest cliché in the book. The lodge became even more important to me. It was the one place untouched by the pain of betrayal, a refuge where I could lick my wounds and begin rebuilding. My job as a hospital administrator had become nearly unbearable during the healthcare crisis of the past few years. 70-hour workweeks, staff shortages, and the emotional toll had pushed me to the brink of burnout. When my boss finally insisted I take accumulated vacation time, the lodge was the only place I wanted to be. Rebecca and I had grown distant since her marriage to Tyler 3 years ago. He came from old money, the kind that's been passed through generations and creates a certain entitled attitude. When they started dating, Rebecca changed. Her clothes became more expensive, her tastes more refined, her calls to me less frequent. The last time we spoke had been 2 weeks ago, when she called asking if she and Tyler could use the lodge for a weekend getaway. I agreed, of course. What I hadn't agreed to was finding them fully moved in with his entire family. As we all stood awkwardly in the upstairs hallway that evening, I tried to make sense of the situation. Tyler's parents, Eleanor and Richard Hamilton, were dressed in casual but obviously expensive clothes. His brother Jacob and sister Megan hung back, exchanging glances with each other. The bathroom counter was covered with toiletries. This wasn't a weekend visit. This looked like a full-scale occupation. "Let's go downstairs and sort this out," I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady. In the living room, I noticed the changes immediately. My grandparents' worn but comfortable sofa had been pushed against the wall, replaced by sleek modern furniture I'd never seen before. The handmade quilts were gone, substituted with what looked like designer throws. Even the family photos had been rearranged, some removed entirely. "What exactly is going on here?" I asked, looking directly at Rebecca. She fidgeted with her wedding ring. "We thought you weren't coming until next week. Tyler's parents wanted to see the place. And we just got comfortable." "For 2 weeks?" I asked, noticing mail on the counter postmarked from several weeks ago. Rebecca mentioned you were away for the summer, Eleanor said, her voice crisp with confidence. She said you hardly use this place anymore. I stared at my sister, who suddenly found the floor fascinating. That's not true, I said firmly. And it doesn't explain why you've moved furniture around and brought all this stuff here. We just wanted to make the place a bit more livable, Tyler interjected, putting his arm around Rebecca. No offense, but the decor was a bit outdated. The casual dismissal of my grandparents' beloved home hit me like a slap. Before I could respond, Richard cleared his throat. It's getting dark, and these mountain roads are treacherous at night. Perhaps we should all have dinner and discuss this like adults. Samantha, you look exhausted from your drive. He wasn't wrong. After a 5-hour drive from the city, I was tired and hungry. And despite my growing unease, I couldn't face the winding drive back down the mountain in darkness. I reluctantly agreed to stay for dinner, not realizing I was about to uncover just how deep my sister's betrayal went. Dinner was served on the antique oak table my grandfather had crafted by hand, though now it was barely recognizable under a modern table runner and elaborate centerpiece that screamed Eleanor's taste. We ate in uncomfortable silence for several minutes before Richard began discussing renovation plans for what he called their new vacation home. The kitchen needs a complete overhaul, he said between bites of the meal Eleanor had prepared. Those cabinets must be from the 70s. They are, I said tightly. Grandpa built them. Richard continued as if I hadn't spoken. And we're thinking of expanding the deck for better entertaining. Nothing brings in business connections like a good mountain retreat. Tyler nodded enthusiastically. Dad's right, we could host amazing parties up here. How long are you planning to stay? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Oh, through the summer at least, Eleanor replied, waving her hand dismissively. The city is absolutely unbearable in the heat. And once the renovations start, we'll want to oversee everything. I nearly choked on my water. Renovations? This is my house. You can't just decide to renovate it. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Rebecca stared intently at her plate, while Tyler and his parents exchanged glances. Rebecca gave us the impression that the lodge was jointly owned, Richard said carefully. I looked at my sister, who was now drinking her wine with remarkable focus. Did she? Because the deed and the will say otherwise. Well, family property is often complicated, Eleanor interjected smoothly. Anyway, this place needs a woman's touch. The whole rustic disaster theme is so limited. I'm thinking of brightening it up, maybe a coastal farmhouse aesthetic. Jacob, Tyler's brother who had been mostly silent, laughed. And that eyesore guest cabin has got to go, perfect spot for a hot tub and outdoor kitchen instead. My heart dropped. The guest cabin held boxes of my grandparents' memorabilia, photo albums, letters, treasured keepsakes I hadn't had the heart to sort through yet. Nobody is tearing down anything, I said firmly, pushing back my chair. Rebecca, can I speak with you in the kitchen? Now. She followed me reluctantly, wine glass still in hand. In the kitchen, I noticed blueprint plans spread across the counter, partially covered by a placemat. What the hell, Rebecca? You told them they could renovate my lodge and stay the entire summer? She wouldn't meet my eyes. It was just going to be for a few weeks, but then Tyler's parents got involved and things escalated. Escalated? They're talking about tearing down structures and remodeling. Why would you let them think this place is partly yours when you know it isn't? Rebecca's face hardened. Because it should have been. Grandma and Grandpa played favorites with you my entire life. They left you everything that mattered. That's not true. It is, she hissed, keeping her voice low enough not to carry. You got the lodge, all the family heirlooms, everything. And now you're mad because I wanted to share something nice with my husband's family? Tyler's parents are helping us financially. They're investing in our future. By planning to gut our grandparents' home without my permission? Rebecca's eyes darted to the blueprints on the counter, and she quickly tried to cover them completely. But not before I saw what they were, not just renovation plans, but a real estate appraisal form. You had the lodge appraised? Are you planning to sell it? Her cheeks flushed red, either from the wine or embarrassment. You wouldn't understand. You've always had everything figured out. Perfect job, perfect house. My husband left me and my job nearly killed me this year. Nothing is perfect. Still, she said, swirling her wine, you got everything, Sam, always. It's my turn. Before I could respond, Tyler entered the kitchen. Everything okay in here, babe? He placed a possessive hand on Rebecca's shoulder, eyeing me suspiciously. Fine, Rebecca muttered, just catching up. I returned to the dining room, my appetite gone, my mind racing. The way Tyler's family talked about the lodge, it was as if they already owned it. And Rebecca was clearly hiding something bigger than just an unauthorized family visit. As darkness settled outside, I realized I had no choice but to spend the night in what felt increasingly like enemy territory. They put me in the small guest bedroom, my own master suite, apparently now occupied by Tyler's parents, with a thin smile and insincere apology about the unexpected circumstances. I sat on the edge of the twin bed, listening to their voices downstairs, my childhood home feeling foreign and hostile. Sleep was impossible. Around midnight, when the house had finally quieted, I slipped out to investigate what else had changed. The hallway was dark except for the moonlight streaming through the windows. I moved silently, years of knowing every creaky floorboard guiding my steps. The living room walls, once covered with family photographs chronicling 4 generations of history, were now half empty. I found the photos stacked in boxes in the coat closet, many of the frames scratched from careless handling. In the study, my grandparents' antique roll-top desk had been replaced with a sleek glass monstrosity that looked ridiculous against the log walls. The bookshelves had been rearranged, my grandfather's first edition Hemingway collection nowhere to be seen. I tried the office desk drawers, finding them unlocked. Inside, papers had been shifted through, file folders rearranged. In the bottom drawer, I kept a small fireproof safe with important documents: my grandparents' will, the deed to the property, insurance papers. My heart stopped when I found it unlocked and empty. As I stood there trying to process this violation, voices drifted from the back porch. I moved to the window, staying in the shadows. Tyler was outside with his parents, speaking in low but clear tones. The attorney says once we get Rebecca's name on the deed, we can move forward without further complications, Richard was saying. And you're sure Samantha will agree to add Rebecca? Eleanor asked. She doesn't have much choice, Tyler replied. The emotional leverage alone should work. If not, Rebecca found some interesting clauses about sibling inheritance rights in this state. She needs to leave tomorrow, Eleanor said firmly. Find a way. We have potential investors coming this weekend to discuss the conversion project. The rental projections for a luxury property in this location are extraordinary, Richard added. We could be looking at $5,000 a weekend, minimum. With the Hamilton brand behind it, we could book solid through all seasons. I backed away from the window, feeling sick. This wasn't just about using my lodge or even renovating it. They were planning to commercialize it, turn my family sanctuary into a money-making venture. And somehow, they believed they could get my name off the deed. With renewed purpose, I crept to the room Rebecca and Tyler were using. I knew it was an invasion of privacy, but they had already violated mine beyond forgiveness. Rebecca's suitcase sat open in the corner. While Tyler remained outside with his parents, I quickly but thoroughly searched through her belongings. Tucked between layers of clothing, I found a folder containing property documents, including copies of the deed to the lodge and, most disturbingly, a power of attorney document with what appeared to be my signature at the bottom. Except, I had never signed such a document. The forgery was close but not perfect. The loop of the S in Samantha was too rounded, a mistake I'd never make. There were also handwritten notes about inheritance laws, specifically regarding sibling rights to contested property, and several printed articles about challenging wills based on verbal promises. A receipt from a local locksmith dated 3 months ago explained how they'd accessed the lodge in my absence. I photographed every document with my phone, hands shaking with rage and disbelief. My own sister had not only invaded my home but was actively conspiring to take it from me legally. As I carefully replaced everything and slipped back to the guest room, I knew confrontation was inevitable, but now I would be prepared. I barely slept that night, my mind oscillating between heartbreak and fury. By dawn, I had formulated a plan. I would confront Rebecca alone first, give her one chance to explain herself before involving the others. Part of me, the part that remembered building snow forts with her and comforting her after nightmares, desperately hoped there was an explanation beyond the obvious betrayal. I've reached a turning point in my story that still makes my heart race when I think about it. Have you ever discovered someone close to you wasn't who you thought they were? That moment when the truth hits you like a physical blow? If you're finding this family drama as intense as I lived it, hit that like button. It honestly helps me feel less alone in what happened next. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. The confrontation that followed changed everything, and you won't want to miss how this all unfolds. I cornered Rebecca early the next morning in the kitchen as she made coffee. Everyone else was still asleep, giving us a rare moment of privacy. I placed the photographed documents on the counter between us. Care to explain this? I asked quietly. Rebecca's face drained of color as she recognized the power of attorney form. You went through my things? She whispered, outrage fighting with panic in her voice. After finding out you went through my safe, I'd say we're even. Although I didn't forge your signature on legal documents, so maybe not. Her hands trembled as she picked up her coffee mug. You don't understand, Sam. Tyler's family what? Convinced you to commit fraud? Talked you into stealing my property? They have expectations, she hissed. Do you know what it's like being married into the Hamilton family? The pressure, the constant judgment? Tyler was supposed to marry someone from their social circle, not a girl with no connections and a community college degree. So you decided to offer up my inheritance as your dowry? Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. They were going to help us financially. Tyler's business isn't doing well, and we've had money troubles. What kind of money troubles justify stealing your sister's home? She looked away, shame finally crossing her face. Gambling, she whispered. It started small, just poker nights with Tyler's friends. Then, online betting. It got out of control. How much? Almost 80,000. I stared at her in disbelief. And Tyler's solution was to steal my lodge rather than get you help? His parents offered to clear the debt if we could secure this property. They've been looking for an investment opportunity in this area for years. When I mentioned the lodge, they became fixated on it. She took a shuddering breath. You were always the favorite, Sam. Grandma and Grandpa gave you everything. This perfect place, all their love. I just wanted something for once. They loved you just as much, I said, my voice softening despite myself. They left the city condo to you because you always hated it up here. You said the lodge was boring and isolated. I was a teenager. People change. People don't change enough to justify fraud, Rebecca. Before she could respond, Tyler appeared in the doorway, his father Richard close behind. Their casual expressions hardened as they assessed the situation. Everything okay, babe? Tyler asked, his eyes fixed on the documents between us. She found the papers, Rebecca said quietly. Richard stepped forward, his lawyer persona taking over. Samantha, I think we should discuss this reasonably. Family properties are often complicated emotional affairs. There's nothing complicated about it, I replied, gathering the papers. This is my property, left to me legally by our grandparents. Rebecca has no claim to it, and these documents are fraudulent. Tyler's face darkened. You've always been selfish with this place. Rebecca deserves a husband who doesn't use her to steal property, I cut in. How much debt did you rack up together, Tyler? Is my sister's gambling problem something you encouraged? His surprised expression confirmed Rebecca hadn't told him I knew about the gambling. Richard stepped between us, his height allowing him to tower over me intimidatingly. Let's not get hysterical about this. I'm an attorney, Samantha. I can make things very difficult if you choose to be unreasonable. Is that a threat? It's a reality. Legal battles are expensive and exhausting. You've just been through a divorce, you're obviously stretched thin emotionally. His voice softened to a patronizing tone. Why put yourself through more stress? We're prepared to make a very generous offer for the lodge. You could start fresh somewhere else. By now, Eleanor, Jacob, and Megan had joined us, forming a semicircle that felt increasingly threatening. I'm not selling, I said firmly. Then we'll pursue Rebecca's legal right to contest the will, Richard replied smoothly. It could take years, during which the property will be tied up in litigation. No one wins in that scenario, except you, who gets to intimidate a woman out of her inheritance. Eleanor sniffed disapprovingly. We're simply trying to resolve a family dispute amicably. By forging documents and threatening me? That's your definition of amicable? Tyler stepped forward, his face inches from mine. You're outnumbered here, Samantha. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The implied threat hung in the air. I looked at Rebecca, hoping for some sign of the sister I once knew, but she stood silently beside Tyler, eyes downcast. "I want all of you out of my house," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "That's not happening," Tyler replied. "Then I'll call the sheriff." Richard laughed. "On what grounds? Rebecca has been receiving mail here, establishing residency. It would be a civil matter at best." I hadn't considered that complication. Without the original deed which they had taken from my safe, I would have difficulty proving immediate ownership. They had planned this meticulously. "You have 1 hour to pack your things," Richard continued. "We'll have our attorney contact you with an offer next week. I suggest you take it." I looked around at the hostile faces surrounding me, at the home that no longer felt like mine, and made a decision. Fine. I need to get some things from upstairs. Retreating to the guest room, I quickly packed my overnight bag, adding the framed photo of my grandparents from the nightstand, one of the few that hadn't been boxed up. Through the window, I could see Tyler's parents already discussing something with animated gestures on the deck, pointing to different areas of the property. When I came downstairs, Rebecca was waiting in the entryway alone. "Sam, I'm sorry it came to this," she said, tears in her eyes. "I never wanted." "Save it," I interrupted. "You made your choice. You chose Tyler and money over family. That's not fair. You've always had everything figured out. Perfect job, perfect husband. My husband left me for his assistant, and my job nearly drove me to a breakdown. Nothing is perfect, Rebecca, but I never would have betrayed you like this." She fell silent, unable to meet my eyes. From the kitchen, I could hear Tyler and his family already discussing renovation plans, their voices animated with excitement. "Goodbye, Rebecca," I said, picking up my bag. "I hope it was worth it." As I drove down the mountain, tears blurred my vision. I had lost my sanctuary, my childhood home, and my sister all in the span of 24 hours. But beneath the grief, something else was building. Determination. The Hamiltons had chosen the wrong woman to intimidate. This fight was just beginning. I drove straight to the city, stopping only for coffee and gas. By late afternoon, I was sitting in the office of Emma Gonzalez, my college roommate who had become a successful real estate attorney. I hadn't seen her in nearly 2 years, but she cleared her schedule immediately when I called. "Let me get this straight," she said after I explained the situation. "Your sister and her husband's family have essentially taken over your lodge, forged your signature on legal documents, and are now threatening you with lengthy legal battles if you don't sell to them?" "That about covers it," I replied, exhaustion finally catching up with me. Emma's expression hardened. "First, we need to understand exactly where you're vulnerable. Do you have the original will and deed?" "The originals were in my safe at the lodge, which they emptied. I have copies in a safety deposit box, but I don't know if that's enough." "It's a start," Emma said, making notes. "The concerning part is that Rebecca may have legal grounds to contest the inheritance, especially if she's been receiving mail there, establishing it as a residence. But our grandparents specifically left it to me." "Yes, but sibling inheritance challenges are complicated. Courts sometimes favor equitable division regardless of the will's specifics." She looked up from her notes. "Has Rebecca paid any property taxes or maintenance costs?" "No, never." "That's good. What about the forged power of attorney?" "I have photos of it, but they have the original." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "They could have used that for loan applications, potentially creating liens against the property. We need to check county records immediately." Over the next several days, Emma and I conducted a thorough investigation. At the county records office, we discovered several recent inquiries about my property, including a preliminary assessment for commercial zoning, something that would only be necessary if they planned to use the lodge as a rental business. "Mr. Hamilton has been busy," Emma observed as we reviewed the documents. A visit to the local hardware store near the lodge revealed more troubling information. The owner, Dave, had known my family for years. "Oh yeah, the new owners ordered a bunch of supplies last month," he said casually. "Said they're planning a complete overhaul this summer." "New owners?" I asked, my heart sinking. "That's what they called themselves. Fancy fellow with the silver hair and his designer wife. Said they're turning it into some kind of exclusive retreat." Even worse was my conversation with Mr. Peterson, whose cabin neighbored our property. He'd known my grandparents for decades. Your sister's been hosting quite a few gatherings up there, he told me over coffee at the local diner. Lots of well-dressed folks being given tours of the property. Called them investment parties when I asked. Thought you knew about it. The final devastating discovery came when Emma and I visited a real estate office in town. The agent recognized my name immediately. Oh, the Mountain Lodge. Yes, your sister brought in some preliminary paperwork about listing it, but we needed all owners to sign off. We've been waiting for you to come in. By the end of our investigation, the picture was clear. Tyler's family had been planning this takeover for months, possibly since he and Rebecca got married. They had systematically established Rebecca's claim to the property while preparing to put it on the market. So what can we do? I asked Emma as we sat in her office, surrounded by notes and documents. We need to approach this from multiple angles, she replied. First, we secure all documentation proving your ownership, the will, tax records showing you as the sole payer, maintenance receipts. Second, we document the fraud. The forged power of attorney is a criminal offense. Third, we need eyes on the property to document what they're doing. How do we do that? They won't let me near the place. Emma smiled. I took the liberty of contacting Jim Bradley, the handyman who's worked on your lodge for years. He's willing to offer his services to the Hamiltons and report back to us. They won't suspect him. He's been the local fix-it guy forever. Isn't that unethical? What's unethical is forging documents and stealing property, Emma replied firmly. We're just gathering evidence. Over the next week, we formulated a comprehensive strategy. Emma assembled a team including a forensic financial expert to trace any fraudulent loan applications and a security specialist who helped me secure my remaining legal documents and financial accounts. The key, Emma advised, is to appear to retreat while we build our case. Let them think they've won for now. The more comfortable they get, the more mistakes they'll make. I nodded, though every part of me wanted to storm the lodge and reclaim what was mine. How long will this take? Weeks. Possibly months. Legal wheels turn slowly. She put a hand on my shoulder. I know that's not what you want to hear, but rushing this could backfire spectacularly. Richard Hamilton isn't just any attorney. He specializes in real estate acquisition and has a reputation for aggressive tactics. We need to be smarter, not faster. I agreed reluctantly, settling into a temporary apartment in the city while we worked. The waiting was excruciating. Each day brought reports from Jim about new changes to the lodge furniture being removed, contractors measuring for renovations, Tyler's family hosting potential investors for what they were calling the Hamilton Mountain Retreat. This isn't just about the property anymore, I told Emma after a particularly difficult day. It's about justice. They think they can steamroll me because I'm alone. Because I'm vulnerable after my divorce. They picked the wrong woman to underestimate. Emma smiled. That's the fighting spirit we need. Now let's channel it into building an airtight case. As weeks turned into a month, our evidence mounted. Jim's surveillance provided crucial documentation of the Hamiltons' activities, including photographs of them removing family heirlooms and discussions about property development plans. Emma's financial investigation uncovered attempts to use the forged power of attorney to secure a business loan against the property. Most importantly, we discovered that this wasn't the first time the Hamilton family had used these tactics. Emma's contacts in legal circles revealed a pattern of acquiring properties through intimidation and legal maneuvering, particularly targeting vulnerable owners going through personal crises. They identify a property they want, find a way to establish a foothold, usually through a family member or business associate, then make life so difficult for the owner that selling becomes the path of least resistance. Emma explained. And Rebecca was their foothold for my lodge, I said quietly. The betrayal still cut deep, but I was beginning to understand the pressure my sister must have been under. The Hamiltons were master manipulators with decades of experience. Rebecca, with her gambling addiction and insecurities, had been the perfect target. As our case built, so did my resolve. This wasn't just about reclaiming my property anymore, it was about stopping a family that had built their fortune on exploiting others. And I was perfectly positioned to be the one who finally stood up to them. While Emma worked on the legal aspects of our case, I focused on gathering documentation that would strengthen my emotional claim to the lodge. I drove to the storage unit where I'd kept some of my grandparents' belongings after their passing, items I hadn't been ready to sort through during my initial grief. The climate-controlled space contained several boxes of papers, photo albums, and personal effects. I spent hours sifting through decades of family history, finding treasures I'd forgotten existed: my grandmother's handwritten recipe book, my grandfather's fishing journals, and dozens of cards and letters they'd exchanged throughout their 60-year marriage. In a file box labeled Important Papers, I found their original will and supporting documents. A wave of relief washed over me. This was the proof I needed. The will explicitly stated their wishes. To our granddaughter Samantha, who has shown such love and dedication to our mountain home, we leave the lodge and all its contents, knowing she will honor our memory and maintain the property as a place of family gathering and peace. More surprising was an unsent letter from my grandmother, dated just months before her death, addressed to Rebecca. My dearest Rebecca, I worry about the distance that has grown between you and your sister. Family is precious, especially after losing your parents so young. Your grandfather and I have decided to leave the lodge to Samantha, as she has shown such commitment to preserving it. But this doesn't mean we love you less. Your strength has always been in building new things, not preserving old ones. That's why we've provided for you differently. Please don't let this decision come between you and your sister. Someday, you might understand that inheritance isn't just about property or money, it's about honoring the unique gifts of each person. With all my love, Grandma. The letter had never been sent, but it confirmed what I'd always believed: my grandparents had made their decision out of love for both of us, not favoritism. I also found a childhood diary I'd kept, with entries documenting a pattern I'd forgotten. Rebecca's tendency toward jealousy and impulsive decisions, even as a child. In one entry, I'd written about Rebecca cutting up a dress our grandmother had sewn for me because she wanted one too, though she'd refused when originally offered. Another described her claiming my school project as her own, only to abandon it when the responsibility became too much. These weren't the reflections of an adult with perspective, but a child recording events as they happened. They painted a picture of a pattern that had continued into adulthood. Rebecca wanting what I had not because she valued it, but because it was mine. While I researched my family history, Emma was digging into the Hamiltons. What she discovered was disturbing. Richard Hamilton's law firm specializes in real estate acquisition, but they have a reputation for aggressive tactics, she explained, showing me news articles about previous property disputes. They target properties in desirable locations, particularly those owned by people going through personal crises, divorce, death in the family, financial troubles. Like my divorce and job burnout, I noted. Exactly. They identify vulnerable owners, find a way in through a connection, in your case, Rebecca, and then either pressure the owner to sell or tie them up in legal battles until they're financially and emotionally exhausted. One article detailed how they'd purchased a historic lakefront property from an elderly widow whose husband had recently died. She'd initially refused to sell, but after months of legal harassment claiming code violations and property line disputes, she'd given in for a fraction of the property's worth. They're property predators, I said, disgust rising in my throat. On a hunch, I searched for information about Tyler's previous relationships. Through social media and some careful detective work, I located Melissa Chang, a woman he'd dated for 2 years before meeting Rebecca. She agreed to meet me for coffee, clearly surprised by my call. I never thought I'd hear from anyone in Tyler's orbit again, she said, stirring her latte nervously. I'm not exactly in his orbit, I clarified, more like trying to escape it. Over the next hour, Melissa confirmed my worst suspicions. While dating Tyler, she'd introduced him to her family, including her parents' lakefront cabin that had been in their family for generations. Tyler became obsessed with it, she explained. At first, I thought it was cute how much he loved spending time there. Then his parents started coming along, making suggestions about renovations and asking detailed questions about the property value. When Melissa's father refused to sell, the harassment began: anonymous complaints to building inspectors, strange cars parked outside at all hours. Even rumors spread in their social circle about financial troubles that didn't exist. The worst part was realizing Tyler had only been with me to get access to the property, she said, pain still evident in her voice years later. Once his family realized my dad wouldn't budge, Tyler broke up with me. 2 weeks later, he was dating a girl whose family owned a vineyard they'd been trying to acquire. That must have been right before he met Rebecca, I realized aloud. Melissa nodded. From what I heard, the vineyard girl's family saw through them pretty quickly. Tyler's family needs these properties for their business model. They flip them into exclusive luxury rentals. The more unique the property and location, the better. She provided me with copies of threatening texts from Tyler after the breakup and documentation of the harassment her family had endured. I wish I'd warned your sister, she said as we parted. But by the time I heard about them, they were already married. It's not your fault, I assured her. They're very good at what they do. As I drove home from our meeting, I felt a complex mix of emotions. The anger toward Rebecca remained, but it was now tempered with understanding. She hadn't just betrayed me out of jealousy or greed, she'd been manipulated by experts, her vulnerabilities exploited by people who'd done this many times before. That evening, I visited my grandparents' graves, bringing fresh flowers and taking a moment to connect with their memory. Standing before their headstones, I made a silent promise. I would not only reclaim our family home, but would also free my sister from the grip of these predators, even if she didn't yet recognize the danger she was in. The full picture was now clear. This wasn't just about a property dispute or even a sister's betrayal. It was about standing up to a family that had built their fortune by exploiting others' vulnerabilities and family connections. And I was more determined than ever to be the one who finally stopped them. By the 6-week mark, Jim's surveillance had provided us with crucial evidence. Using small cameras he'd installed while doing maintenance around the lodge, we captured Tyler's father removing more family heirlooms, loading antique furniture into a moving van one night. The audio captured him telling Tyler, "No sense letting this stuff go to waste if we're going to gut the place anyway." Most disturbingly, we had footage of Rebecca during these activities. She was clearly uncomfortable, often stepping away or making weak protests, but ultimately complicit. In one particularly painful clip, Eleanor berated her for being sentimental about junk when Rebecca objected to them removing my grandparents' hand-carved chess set. "That belongs to Sam," Rebecca had said quietly. "Everything here belongs to the family now," Eleanor had replied sharply, "and you need to decide which family you're loyal to." The surveillance also revealed their business plans. Local contractors had been brought in to assess major renovations, knocking down walls to create an open concept layout, expanding the deck to 3 times its current size. Even plans for a helicopter landing pad on the adjacent field. They're planning to turn it into a playground, for the ultra-wealthy, Emma observed as we reviewed the footage. Most damning was an audio recording of Richard Hamilton discussing their strategy with Tyler. "The longer we wait, the more desperate she'll become. We'll start with a lowball offer, maybe a third of market value, and increase gradually if she holds out. But most of these emotional types cave early, especially when they're already financially stretched." With this evidence in hand, Emma and I finalized our counter-strategy with our assembled team. The private investigator had documented all activities at the lodge, while our financial forensic expert had tracked their attempts to leverage the property. The security specialist had secured all my remaining documents and accounts against further invasion. "We have enough to move forward legally," Emma said during our strategy meeting. "But legal battles can drag on for years, especially against someone with Richard Hamilton's resources." "I don't want this dragging on," I insisted. "Every day they're in my lodge is another day they're erasing my grandparents' legacy." "Then we need to be smarter, not just legally right," Emma replied. "We need to hit them where it hurts their reputation and business model." Our plan took shape over several days. First, we established a shell company to protect my other assets from potential legal retaliation. Then we secured affidavits from neighbors and local businesses documenting my continuous ownership and presence at the lodge over the years. Jim collected statements from contractors who had been misled about ownership of the property, several of whom were upset to learn they'd been unwittingly participating in a fraudulent scheme. Most importantly, we cultivated a relationship with Sheriff Mark Collins, who had known my grandparents for years. Initially hesitant to get involved in what he saw as a family dispute, his attitude changed when we showed him the forged power of attorney. "Forgery's a criminal offense," he noted, examining the document. "And I've been hearing complaints about these new folks from several locals, not exactly endearing themselves to the community. With our preparations in place, We began the waiting game. Emma advised me to stay away from the lodge for now, to let the Hamiltons believe they had scared me off. This was perhaps the hardest part, knowing strangers were in my family home, removing treasured possessions and planning to erase the character that made it special. The psychological toll was significant. I suffered from anxiety and insomnia, often waking from nightmares about the lodge burning down or being demolished. My therapist, Dr. Winters, helped me process not just the property dispute but the deeper betrayal by Rebecca. "Your sister's actions have broken a fundamental trust," she observed during one session. "You're grieving not just the potential loss of the property, but the loss of the relationship you thought you had." This perspective helped me separate my feelings about the lodge from my feelings about Rebecca. I could fight for my property without letting anger at my sister consume me. In fact, understanding the manipulation she'd experienced allowed me to maintain a measure of compassion, even amid my hurt and disappointment. Support from friends proved invaluable during this time. My friend Lisa opened her guest room to me while I was displaced. Former colleagues brought meals and offered emotional support. Even my ex-husband Michael, hearing about the situation through mutual friends, called to express his concern. "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from," he said awkwardly, "but what they're doing isn't right. If you need character witnesses or anything, I'm here." I thanked him politely but maintained boundaries. This was my battle to fight. As weeks turned to months, we continued gathering evidence. The Hamiltons grew increasingly comfortable in their occupation, hosting larger gatherings and making more permanent changes to the property. Jim reported they had begun removing interior walls on the ground floor, despite not having proper permits. "They're getting cocky," Emma observed. "They think they've won." "They haven't," I replied, reviewing our extensive documentation, not by a long shot. By the 3-month mark, we had assembled an overwhelming case. The forged power of attorney alone constituted criminal fraud. The unauthorized structural changes violated multiple building codes. Their attempts to secure loans against the property without full ownership constituted mortgage fraud. And we had documented evidence of their pattern of similar behaviors with other properties. "We're ready," Emma announced during our final planning meeting. "The question is, how do you want to proceed? We could file civil and criminal complaints, but that process would take time." I thought about it carefully. I want my home back immediately, and I want to confront them face to face, not hide behind legal papers. Emma nodded. "Then we go with Plan A, direct confrontation, with legal and law enforcement backup." We chose our moment carefully. Through Jim's surveillance, we learned that the Hamiltons were planning a major gathering that weekend, an investment opportunity presentation for wealthy potential partners in their venture. It would be the perfect time to expose their scheme in front of the very people whose money and connections they coveted. As we finalized our preparations, I felt a strange calm descend. For months, I had been reacting to their actions, feeling victimized and powerless. Now, I was taking back control. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my terms, not theirs. The night before our planned confrontation, I stood at my apartment window looking out at the city lights. I thought about my grandparents, about the love they'd poured into the lodge, and about the lessons they'd taught me about standing up for what's right. I thought about Rebecca, wondering if tomorrow would destroy any chance of reconciliation or, perhaps improbably, create an opportunity for healing. Either way, by this time tomorrow, everything would change. The Hamiltons had chosen the wrong woman and the wrong family legacy to target. They were about to learn that some things can't be bought, bullied, or stolen no matter how much money or legal maneuvering you have on your side. Saturday dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for the drive up to the lodge. Emma and I met Sheriff Collins at the ranger station, 5 miles from the property, to finalize our approach. "There are at least 15 cars already at the lodge," the sheriff reported. "Looks like quite the gathering." "That's exactly what we want," Emma replied, reviewing our documentation one last time, maximum witnesses to their embarrassment. I wore a simple but professional outfit, a navy blazer, white blouse, and tailored pants. This wasn't about intimidation through power dressing, but presenting myself as the legitimate property owner I was. I carried a small briefcase containing copies of all our evidence, though Emma had the originals safely secured. "Ready?" Sheriff Collins asked as we prepared to drive the final stretch. I took a deep breath. as I'll ever be. We timed our arrival for 2 p.m. when Jim had informed us the investment presentation would be in full swing. Pulling up to the lodge, I barely recognized the place. New landscaping had been installed, the rustic sign replaced with an elegant Hamilton Mountain Retreat placard. Luxury vehicles lined the expanded driveway. Sheriff Collins parked directly behind Richard Hamilton's Bentley, effectively blocking it in. Emma and I followed in my more modest sedan. As we approached the front door, I could hear Richard's voice through the open windows, addressing the gathered crowd on the deck. Exclusive opportunity to invest in the premier luxury mountain experience in the region. With our proven track record of high-return hospitality ventures, rather than knocking, Sheriff Collins pushed the door open, and we walked through. The great room had been completely transformed, walls removed to create an open-concept space, my grandparents' comfortable furnishings replaced with modern minimalist pieces. About 20 well-dressed people stood holding champagne flutes, listening to Richard's presentation. Rebecca spotted us first. She was standing beside Tyler, wearing a dress I'd never seen before, looking thin and tense. Her eyes widened in shock, and she grabbed Tyler's arm, whispering urgently in his ear. Tyler turned, his face darkening at the sight of us. Richard, noticing the disruption, paused mid-sentence. "Sheriff Collins," he said, recovering quickly. "What can we do for you today?" "Mr. Hamilton," the sheriff replied formally. "I'm here on official business regarding ownership disputes and potential fraudulent activity at this property." A murmur ran through the assembled guests. Eleanor stepped forward, social grace in full deployment. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately?" "Our guests are here for a relaxing afternoon." "Actually," I said, stepping forward, "your guests should hear this. My name is Samantha Winters. This lodge has been in my family for 3 generations and was left to me by my grandparents. These people," I gestured to the Hamiltons, "have been occupying it illegally and attempting to sell investment shares in property they do not own." Richard's professional smile remained fixed, though his eyes hardened. "Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse this interruption. My sister-in-law is going through a difficult time and has some confusion about family property arrangements." "There's no confusion," Emma stated, opening her briefcase. "Miss Winters has sole legal ownership of this property. We have documentation proving unauthorized occupation, forgery of legal documents, and attempts to secure fraudulent loans against the property." Sheriff Collins stepped forward. "I've reviewed the evidence and find sufficient cause to investigate criminal charges including forgery, mail fraud, and real estate fraud." The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, some discreetly moving toward the exit. Tyler moved to stand beside his father, his face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. Rebecca has legal rights to this property as a family member. Rebecca's name isn't on the deed, the will, or any legal document relating to this property," I replied evenly. "And the power of attorney document you've been using has a forged signature." All eyes turned to Rebecca, who stood frozen, her face ashen. "Tell them, Rebecca," Tyler demanded. "Tell them about our legal right to be here." Something shifted in Rebecca's expression, a subtle hardening of resolve. She looked from Tyler to me, then to the assembled crowd. "There is no legal right," she said, her voice barely audible. "Samantha is the sole owner. We've been," she faltered. "Babe, what are you doing?" Tyler hissed. "Telling the truth," Rebecca replied, her voice stronger. "I'm tired of lying. I'm tired of what we've done to this place. To my sister." Richard stepped in smoothly. "Rebecca is understandably emotional. The medication for her condition sometimes affects her clarity." "I don't have a condition, and I'm not on medication," Rebecca snapped, surprising everyone with her sudden fire. "What I have is a gambling addiction that Tyler encouraged, and then used to manipulate me into this scheme." The guests began actively leaving now, murmuring about family matters and another time. One distinguished-looking man approached Richard directly. "I think we've seen enough, Hamilton. Don't contact our investment group again." Richard's composed facade finally cracked. "This is absurd. We've invested considerable resources into this property already." "Without ownership or permission," Sheriff Collins pointed out. Eleanor, seeing their social and business opportunity crumbling, tried a different approach. "Samantha, Surely we can discuss this privately. Family matters shouldn't be aired so publicly. We're not family, I replied firmly, and you've had 3 months to discuss this while stealing my property and family heirlooms. As the situation deteriorated for the Hamiltons, Rebecca moved to stand beside me, a symbolic shift that wasn't lost on anyone in the room. I'm sorry, Sam, she said quietly. They promised to clear my gambling debts if I helped them get the lodge. Tyler knew I was vulnerable. They've done this before. Tyler's face contorted with rage. Shut up, Rebecca. No, she said, surprising me with her resolve. I won't. You married me specifically to get access to this property. Your father researched inheritance vulnerabilities before you even proposed. This revelation seemed to shock even some of the remaining Hamilton family friends, who quickly made their exits. Jacob, Tyler's brother who had remained silent until now, broke unexpectedly. She's right. Dad had us researching the property values in this area a year before Tyler even met Rebecca. This is what we always do. Jacob, Eleanor snapped, that's enough. But it was too late. The carefully constructed facade had crumbled completely. Sheriff Collins stepped forward. Mr. and Mrs. Hamilton, I'll need statements from all of you down at the station. And I'll need any keys to this property returned to Miss Winters immediately. This isn't over, Richard threatened, his voice low. I have connections throughout the legal system. One small-town sheriff won't Save the threats, Emma interrupted. We've documented your pattern of property acquisition through manipulation and intimidation. 3 of your previous victims have already provided statements, with more coming forward. Your legal connections won't help with a multi-jurisdiction fraud investigation. For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Richard's face. As the remaining guests departed and Sheriff Collins began taking preliminary statements, I walked through the transformed lodge, taking in all the changes. The physical alterations were extensive, but what hurt most was the erasure of my grandparents' presence, the memories embedded in every corner, now scrubbed away in favor of sterile luxury. In the midst of this surreal scene, Rebecca approached me hesitantly. Sam, I know you probably hate me, and you have every right to. What I did was unforgivable. I studied my sister's face, the familiar features now strained with shame and regret. Why, Becca? Really, why? Her eyes filled with tears. At first, it was the gambling debts. I was terrified and desperate. Then, it became about finally being enough for someone. Tyler made me feel special, chosen. His family has so much money, so much power. Being accepted by them felt like finally winning at something. Even at the cost of betraying your own family? She wiped away tears. They're very good at making you believe their version of reality. They convinced me you had everything: success, stability, and I deserved something too. By the time I realized what was really happening, I was in too deep. I couldn't offer forgiveness yet, the wound was too fresh, the betrayal too profound. But standing in the hollowed-out shell of our family home, I realized something important. The Hamiltons had victimized both of us, in different ways. Rebecca had made terrible choices, but she had also been manipulated by experts. We have a lot to work through, I said finally. But right now, we need to deal with this mess. As Emma finished coordinating with Sheriff Collins and the last of the guests departed, I stood on the front porch, watching the Hamiltons being escorted to their vehicles. Tyler glared at me with undisguised hatred. Richard maintained his composure, though the rigid set of his shoulders betrayed his fury. Eleanor and Megan avoided eye contact entirely. Only Jacob hesitated, breaking away to approach me. For what it's worth, I'm sorry, he said quietly. Not all of us wanted to be part of the family business. Before I could respond, Richard called sharply, Jacob, now! As their cars disappeared down the mountain road, I felt a weight lifting. The battle wasn't over. Legal proceedings would likely drag on for months, but the immediate invasion had been halted. The lodge was mine again, though healing its wounds would take time. Rebecca stood beside me, a tentative presence. What happens now? She asked. Now, I said, turning to face the damaged but reclaimed lodge, we start rebuilding. The aftermath of the confrontation unfolded over the following months in ways I couldn't have anticipated. The legal consequences for the Hamiltons were swift and significant. Richard's carefully cultivated reputation in legal and business circles crumbled as news of the fraud investigation spread. The forged power of attorney alone constituted a serious offense, but as Emma had predicted, our exposure prompted other victims to come forward. 3 families who had previously been pressured into selling properties to the Hamiltons filed their own complaints, creating a pattern that prosecutors couldn't ignore. Richard faced disbarment proceedings and potential criminal charges. Tyler, implicated in multiple fraudulent schemes, watched his fledgling business connections evaporate overnight. Most surprising was Eleanor's reaction. Rather than standing by her husband and son, she filed for divorce within weeks of the confrontation, apparently unwilling to go down with the sinking ship. Jacob reached out to me privately, explaining that his mother had been looking for an exit strategy for years. The family business was always my father's obsession, not hers, he explained during a cautious coffee meeting. She enjoyed the lifestyle but hated the methods. This gave her the perfect opportunity to leave without losing social standing. I declined to press criminal charges against Rebecca, despite Emma's concerns that I was being too lenient. My sister had been manipulated and used, her vulnerabilities exploited by people who had turned exploitation into an art form. That didn't excuse her actions, but it did contextualize them in a way that allowed me to begin the long process of forgiveness. Rebecca, for her part, finally took responsibility for her choices. Within days of the confrontation, she enrolled in a treatment program for gambling addiction. Her marriage to Tyler dissolved quickly, especially after bank records revealed he had actually encouraged her gambling, sometimes placing bets for her when she tried to stop. "I thought it was just something fun we did together," she admitted during one of our careful, tentative conversations. "I didn't realize he was deliberately getting me addicted, creating a vulnerability he could use." The Hamiltons were required by court order to return all removed items from the lodge and pay substantial damages for the unauthorized renovations. Many family heirlooms had already been sold or discarded, a loss that money couldn't compensate. The guest cabin, thankfully, had remained untouched, preserving the boxes of memorabilia stored there. Physically restoring the lodge became a form of therapy for me. I hired local contractors, many of whom had known my grandparents, to reverse the most egregious changes while updating what genuinely needed modernization. The process of selecting paint colors, replacing furniture, and rehanging family photos helped reclaim the space both physically and emotionally. I installed new security systems, added motion sensor lighting, and worked with Emma to create ironclad legal protections against future challenges. The vulnerability that had allowed the Hamiltons to gain their foothold had been permanently closed. The most unexpected outcome was the response from the local community. News of the confrontation spread quickly through the small mountain town. Rather than creating awkwardness, it generated a wave of support. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles and offers of help. Dave from the hardware store provided materials at cost. Sheriff Collins increased patrols past the property just to keep an eye on things. "Your grandparents were beloved here," Mr. Peterson explained during one of his visits. "People didn't take kindly to outsiders trying to turn their home into some kind of playground for the rich." This connection with the community my grandparents had cherished became an unexpected gift, a reminder that family extends beyond blood relations to include the people who share your values and support you when needed. My relationship with Rebecca evolved slowly, painfully, but steadily toward healing. After completing her initial treatment program, she found an apartment in the city and a job at a local bookstore. Our conversations, awkward at first, gradually became more natural. The trust that had been broken would take years to rebuild, if ever, but we found a way to be in each other's lives again. 6 months after the confrontation, I invited her to visit the restored lodge for the first time. "Are you sure?" she asked hesitantly over the phone. "I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted me there again." "I'm sure," I replied. "It's time." Her arrival was emotional for both of us. I watched her take in the restored great room, the family photos back in their places, the familiar comfort that had been temporarily erased. "It looks like home again," she said softly, tears in her eyes. That was the goal. We spent the weekend talking more openly than we had in years, perhaps ever. Rebecca shared her struggles with always feeling second best, her resentment over the inheritance, and the vulnerability that had made her susceptible to Tyler's manipulation. "I always thought you had everything figured out," she admitted as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Perfect career, perfect marriage, Grandma and Grandpa's obvious favorite." "None of it was perfect," I replied. The career nearly broke me. The marriage failed spectacularly, and Grandma and Grandpa loved us both, they just recognized our different strengths. I showed her Grandma's unsent letter. Reading it, Rebecca broke down completely. She understood me better than I understood myself, she said through tears. She was right, I never wanted to preserve things, just possess them. That weekend didn't magically repair all the damage, but it established a new foundation, one based on honesty rather than competition and resentment. Rebecca began joining me at the lodge for occasional weekends, gradually becoming a part of its story again, this time as a welcome guest rather than an interloper. The experience transformed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. The betrayal and fight to reclaim my inheritance forced me to discover reserves of strength I hadn't known I possessed. I returned to my hospital administration job with new confidence, negotiating better boundaries and eventually transitioning to a less demanding role that allowed me more time at the lodge. The greatest change, though, was in how I viewed family and belonging. The painful experience of losing and reclaiming my inheritance clarified what truly mattered, not just the physical space, but the connections and memories it represented. I began sharing the lodge with close friends, creating a chosen family to fill the rooms with laughter and new memories alongside the old. Emma and her husband became regular visitors. Even my ex-husband Michael and I established a cautious friendship, though we both recognized that our romantic relationship had ended for good reasons. 1 year after the confrontation, I hosted a reclamation celebration at the lodge, inviting everyone who had helped in the fight: Emma and her legal team, Jim the handyman, Sheriff Collins, and neighbors who had provided support. Rebecca came too, still somewhat tentative but welcomed by all. Standing on the deck that evening, watching the sunset over the mountains my grandparents had loved, I felt their presence more strongly than I had since before the Hamiltons' invasion. The lodge wasn't just a building or property, it was a legacy of love, a physical manifestation of values worth fighting for. Not every story has a perfect ending, and ours certainly didn't. Rebecca and I continue to navigate our complicated relationship. The legal proceedings against the Hamiltons drag on. The lodge still bears scars from its violation, visible in small ways only I would notice. But there's beauty in the imperfection, in the knowledge that what is broken can be rebuilt stronger, that betrayal can lead to deeper understanding, that fighting for what matters can reveal your true capacity for resilience. My grandparents knew this when they built this place log by log, creating not just a structure but a sanctuary that could weather storms both literal and figurative. In reclaiming and rebuilding it, I honored not just their memory but the strength they always believed I possessed. The mountain lodge stands as it always has, a testament to endurance and renewal, and so do I. I hope my story resonates with some of you who have faced your own family betrayals or had to fight for what rightfully belongs to you. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who tried to take advantage of you or your family? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story of reclaiming what was mine against all odds meant something to you, please hit that like button. It truly helps others find these stories of standing up for yourself. Subscribe if you want to hear more about navigating family complications and finding strength in difficult situations. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the things most worth fighting for are the ones that connect us to our past while helping us build our future.